Olamma had always known. The truth sat heavy in her heart, like a stone too large to swallow. It was the kind of truth that made the air feel thick around her, the kind that turned shadows into watching eyes. She fled her father's compound on a moonless night, the weight of her secret pressing against her ribs. Barefoot and breathless, she ran past the sleeping huts, past the old mango tree where her mother used to sit, past the boundary where the village ended and the unknown began. But freedom was not as simple as crossing a threshold. In a market square of a distant town, a fruit seller flushed when she heard Olamma's voice. In a crowded street, a beggar turned his head too sharply, his lips parting as if to call a name he shouldn't know. Everywhere she went, the whispers followed. Isn't that? Could it be? But they said she. Olamma clenched her fist and kept walking. The past was supposed to be behind her, so why did it feel like it was always one step ahead? Olamma walked fast, her heartbeat keeping pace with her hurried steps. She didn't dare look over her shoulder, though she felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing into her back. She had chosen this path. She had chosen to live. So, why did it feel like the world refused to let her go? The first sign came at dawn. She had spent the night curled beneath a tree, wrapped in nothing but her own trembling arms. When she awoke, a piece of cloth, her mother's wrapper, was draped over her like a silent offering. She sat up with a jolt. She had left that wrapper behind. She was sure of it. She scrambled to her feet, scanning the forest for any sign of who had placed it there. But the trees whispered nothing, and the wind carried only silence. Then the second sign. She reached a small village just as the market women were setting up their stalls. Anger gnawed at her, so she approached an elderly woman roasting plantains by the roadside. Good morning, Mama, Olamma said, her voice courteous. The woman turned too slowly. The moment her gaze met Olamma's, her eyes widened. The plantain she was holding slipped from her fingers into the fire. Olamma took a step back. The woman's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands trembled as she fumbled to retrieve the burning plantain, as if the sight of Olamma had shaken something loose inside her. Olamma's stomach twisted. She was a stranger here. No one should know her. But the woman did, and so did the next person, and the next. As she walked through the village, heads turned, conversation stilled. Some people whispered behind cupped hands. Others didn't even try to hide their tears. Olamma picked up her pace, her heart pounding. She had spent years being invisible in her father's house. So why, now that she had run, did it feel like the whole world could see her? Olamma's hands clenched into fists as she pushed forward, weaving through the market crowd. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. The murmurs followed her, the tears burned into her skin. Then she heard it, a child's voice, soft, almost playful. She slowed her steps, her breath catching in her throat. A little girl sat on the ground near a pile of dried fish, her tiny fingers drawing patterns in the dust. She rocked back and forth, singing to herself. The words made Olamma's blood turn cold. Run, run, but the shadows know. Hide, hide, but the whispers grow. She thought she left, but she still belongs. The past is calling. It won't take long. Olamma's legs locked beneath her. The child looked up suddenly, her dark eyes locking onto Olamma's. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Olamma staggered backward. Before she could speak, the child's mother grabbed her by the arm. Hush, Ada, she scolded, her voice sharp. What nonsense are you singing? The little girl only giggled and returned to her drawings. Olama turned on her heel and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the outskirts of the village, her breath ragged, her hands shaking. The song echoed in her mind. It wasn't just a child's rhyme, it was a warning. Olama ran. The tree's blood passed her as she fled the village, her breath ragged, her heart pounding against her ribs. The child's song refused to leave her mind. The eerie tears, the whispers, the way the past seemed to stretch out its fingers and tighten its grip. None of it made sense. She didn't know how far she had run, only that her legs ached and the sky was beginning to darken. The forest around her was thick now, the kind that swallowed sound, leaving only the rustling of unseen creatures. Then she saw it, a small clearing off her head, a place that shouldn't have been there. She slowed, her chest rising and falling heavily. In the middle of the clearing stood a hut, old, leaning slightly to one side, covered in vines, as if the earth itself had tried to reclaim it. Something about it made her stomach twist. She had never seen this earth before, and yet something deep inside her whispered that she had. Her feet moved forward before her mind could protest. The door hung slightly open, creaking as the wind pushed it back and forth. A cold dread crawled around her spine, but she stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of earth and time. Shadows stretched long across the wooden floor, but what made her breath catch was what sat in the center of the room, a bundle of clothes, old, tattered, but familiar, her mother's wrapper. The same one she had found draped over her in the forest. Her throat tightened as she reached for it with trembling fingers, but before she could touch it, a voice. You've come back at last, Olama froze. An old woman sat in the farthest corner of the room, her face hidden beneath a dark hood. She hadn't been there a moment ago. Olama's fingers curled into fists. I don't know you, she whispered. The woman chuckled, a sound like dry leaves scraping against stone. Oh, but you do. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air pressing in on her. Olama wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. You can't escape what is already yours, the woman murmured. Tell me, child, do you even remember why you ran? The question sent a shiver through Olama's bones, because the truth was she didn't. Olama's breath came in shallow bursts. The old woman's words clawed at something buried deep in her mind, something just out of reach. Do you even remember why you ran? Her fingers curled into the fabric of her mother's wrapper. At the moment she touched it, a jolt, not pain, but something close. A flash of red, the sound of heavy breathing, footsteps pounding against the earth, a voice, urgent, desperate. Run, Olama! She gasped and stumbled back, the wrapper falling from her hands as if it had burned her. The old woman chuckled, watching her with something between amusement and pity. The mind is a tricky thing, she murmured. It buries what it fears, but fear does not erase truth, child. Olama shook her head, her pulse a frantic rhythm in her ears. I don't, I don't understand. The woman's fingers traced unseen patterns in the dust. You will. Olama's skin prickled. Who are you? The woman lifted her head slightly, and though her face remained hidden beneath the hood, Olama felt the weight of her stare. I am the keeper of the path you tried to forget. Olama swallowed hard. I don't want to remember. The woman laughed softly, a sound like distant thunder. Then why did you come here? Olama opened her mouth, but no words came. She hadn't meant to come here. She had only been running, and yet her feet had brought her exactly where she wasn't supposed to be. The woman tilted her head. You think you left the past behind, but the past is patient. It waits. Olama's chest tightened. What do you want from me? The woman reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small carved wooden pendant. She placed it on the floor between them. Olama's stomach dropped. She knew that pendant. She had buried it with her own hands. And yet, here it was, waiting for her. Olama's hands trembled as she stared at the pendant. The simple wooden carving, no longer than her palm, seemed to pulse with a presence of its own. She shouldn't touch it, she knew that, and yet her fingers moved on their own, drawn by something deeper than fear, deeper than reason. The moment her skin met the pendant, the world lurched. Darkness swallowed her vision. Then a rush of sound, screams, the crackle of fire, the scent of blood, thick in the air. She wasn't in the hut anymore. She was somewhere else. A full moon hung in the sky, its silver glow casting jagged shadows over the forest. People ran past her, figures she knew but couldn't name. Their faces were twisted in terror, their voices rising in panicked cries. And then she saw him. A man stood in the clearing, his silhouette sharp against the flames consuming the trees behind him. His robes were torn, his breath ragged, his eyes, piercing, desperate, locked onto hers. Olama. Her heart seized. She knew this moment. She had been here before. The man took a step toward her, but something dark moved behind him, something vast and hungry, a shadow without form, a presence that made the very air shudder. Run, Olama! The man's voice rang out. You must leave, now! Her feet refused to move. The shadow lunged, a crash of thunder, and Olama was yanked back into the present. She gasped, collapsing onto the floor of the hut, the pendant still clutched in her hand. Her body shook violently, her chest heaving. The old woman watched in silence. Olama's mind reeled. The man, the fire, the shadow, and the undeniable truth. She hadn't just run away from home. She had run away from something far, far worse. Olama gripped the pendant so tightly it bit into her palm. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her mind spinning. The vision had felt real, too real. The fire, the man, the shadow. She turned to the old woman, her voice hoarse with fear and frustration. What was that? The woman remained still, as if she had been expecting the moment. You saw what was buried. Olama shook her head violently. No, no riddles, no games. I need answers. She pointed at the pendant, her hands shaking. Why do I remember this? Who was that man? And what was that thing behind him? The woman sighed, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. The past does not return without a reason, child. She finally lifted her head, and for the first time, Olama caught a glimpse of her face, a network of deep lines carved into dark skin, eyes that held too many years, too many secrets. You were not supposed to come back, the woman murmured, and yet, here you are. Olama's heartbeat pounded in her ears. I never meant to come back. The woman nodded, as if this, too, was expected. Then tell me, Olama, if you had truly escaped, why does your past still chase you? Olama flinched. She had spent months, years, trying to convince herself she was free, that whatever happened that night had been left behind. But now, a deep, unsettling truth settled in her chest. She had never truly escaped. She had only forgotten. She swallowed hard. The man in my vision, her voice wavered. Who was he? The woman was silent for a long moment. Then, he was the one who tried to save you. The word struck like a blade to the gut. Olama's knees nearly buckled. She searched the woman's face, desperation clawing at her. Tried to save me from what? The old woman exhaled slowly. from yourself. Silence stretched between them. The earth felt smaller, the air heavier. Olama took a shaky step back. That's not possible. The woman only watched her. Isn't it? Olama's head spun. No, the vision had to be wrong. That man, whoever he was, hadn't been saving her. He had been calling for her. Hadn't he? Her pulse pounded in her skull. If he had been trying to save her, then what had she done? Olama staggered back, her mind a swelling storm of fear and disbelief. The old woman's words echoed in her ears. He was the one who tried to save you. No, it didn't make sense. Her hands clenched into fists. You are lying, she whispered. The old woman shook her head. Am I? Olama's breath came faster. The heart felt too small. The walls pressing in. The pendant in her hand burnt like hot coal, but she couldn't let go. I don't believe you, she said, louder this time. The old woman sighed, then stopped hiding. Before Olama could react, the woman lifted a hand and snapped her fingers. The world ripped open. A force like 1,000 ants dragged Olama downward. Her scream was swallowed by the darkness as she plummeted into her own mind. And then she was there. The village square burned. Olama stood in the middle of it, her heart hammering. The flames reflected in her wide, terrified eyes. Around her, people screamed, running for their lives. And at the edge of it all, he stood. The man from her vision. He was alive, flesh and blood. His robes were torn, his face streaked with soot and sweat, his eyes locked onto hers, filled with something raw, desperation. Olama, he panted, taking a step toward her. You don't have to do this. Her chest heaved, her hands ached. She looked down. Blood, fresh, warm, on her fingers, on her arms, on the dagger in her grip. A sob tore from her heart. No, no, this isn't real. This isn't. Olama, listen to me. The man's voice broke through the haze. This is not who you are. You still have a choice. But deep inside, she knew. The choice had already been made. The shadow behind him loomed larger, twisting, writhing, whispering in a voice only she could hear. You are mine. Olama's body trembled violently. The dagger in her hand felt too heavy, too final. And then, the moment she had buried, the truth she had refused to face, the moment she threw the dagger, the moment it pierced his chest, the moment his eyes, wide with shock, met hers one last time before he fell. The fire raged, the shadow laughed, and Olama ran as if she could leave it all behind, ran as if the weight of her sin would never catch up to her. Olama screamed. Her body checked violently as she was yanked out of the vision. The pendant fell from her hands, clattering to the floor. The heart returned. The fire was gone. The man was gone. But the blood, the knowledge remained. She had killed him, the one who had tried to save her. The old woman watched her, unmoving. Now you remember. Olama's breath came in ragged gasps. Her entire body shook. No, she pressed her hands to her head, her voice raw. No, no, no. But the truth wouldn't let her go. She hadn't been the victim. She hadn't been the hunted. She had been the one who. The air in the heart shifted. A cold, familiar presence filled the room. Olama froze. Behind her, a voice, low, broken, and unmistakable. Olama. Her blood ran cold. She turned and faced the man she had killed. Olama's breath hitched. He stood there, the man she had killed. The fire's glow flickered across his face, but his body cast no shadow. His clothes were the same as they had been that night, torn, stained with soot and blood. His chest, where the dagger had sunk deep, was eerily whole. His eyes, however, were not. They were filled with something more terrifying than anger, grief. Olama, his voice was raw, like a wound that never healed. She stumbled back, shaking her head. No, no, this isn't real. The old woman watched in silence, unmoving. Olama's back hit the wall of the hut, her body trembling. You are dead. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I, I killed you. Yes, the man said. You did. The words slammed into her like a hammer. Her breathing grew frantic. Why? His voice was steady, but beneath it lay something heavier. Do you remember why you did it? Olama squeezed her eyes shut. I don't. You do. She gasped as something tightened around her chest. It wasn't a hand. It wasn't a force she could see, but it was there, pulling, dragging her back into herself. The memory shifted. She saw not just the fire, not just the dagger, but the moment before it all happened. The night was thick with whispers. Olama stood before the shrine, the hair pulsing with dark energy. She had come alone. She had chosen to be here. Behind her, the man, her friend, her protector, called her name. Olama, don't do this. She didn't turn. She couldn't. A voice, not her own, slithered through her mind. You want power? You want freedom? Then you must give something in return. Her hands curled into fists. All her life, she had been nothing, a girl with no say, no future, forced into a path she never wanted, trapped by a fate she never chose. But the shadow had promised her more. It had whispered of strength, of a life where she had control. And the price? A single life, a single betrayer. Olama, the man begged. He reached for her, his eyes full of love and desperation. Come back with me. We can find another way. There was no other way. Not for someone like her, not for a girl who had already chosen. Her fingers closed around the dagger. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she turned and plunged the blade into his chest. His gasp tore through the silence. Shock, pain, betrayal. Olama's grip tightened. She had to do this. If she faltered now, if she hesitated, then. But the moment his body hit the ground, something inside her snapped. The power she had been promised did not come. The freedom she had been chasing did not find her. Only the fire, only the screams, only the shadow's laughter as she ran. As she ran from what she had done, Olama's eyes flew open. She was back in the hut, her body shaking violently. The man, his spirit, stood before her, watching. The truth sat heavy in her chest. She had chosen this. She had killed the one person who would have saved her, and now she had to face the consequences. Olama's body trembled, her mind spinning with the weight of the truth. She had betrayed him. She had chosen the darkness, and now he was here, not for revenge, but for something far worse. I should have stopped you that night, the man's spirit murmured. His voice was filled with sorrow, but his eyes, those piercing, knowing eyes, held something else, urgency. Olama pressed her hands to her chest, her breathing ragged. Why are you here? He stepped closer. The firelight flickered, as if disturbed by an unseen force. To warn you. A chill wrapped around her spine. The old woman, still sitting by the fire, finally spoke. You thought you could run from it? Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it was suffocating. You thought forgetting would make you free? Olama's fingers curled into fist. She swallowed that. I left it behind. The old woman's laugh was low, almost pitying, and then the room darkened. The flames didn't go out, but their light dimmed, swallowed by something unseen. The hair grew thick, pressing down on Olama's chest. The ground beneath her felt less solid, as if reality itself had begun to shift. A whisper, soft yet deafening, slithered through the hair. Did you? Olama froze. Her body stiffened. The voice, it came from inside her. The spirit of the man tensed. His form flickered as if something unseen tried to pull him away. It's waking up, he said, his tone sharp. You need to fight it, Olama. Her knees buckled and she screamed. Pain ripped through her skull. Her fingers dug into her arms as her body twisted, as if something inside her was crawling to the surface. You are mine, the voice whispered again, stronger this time. Memories she had long buried rushed back all at once. The whispers, the promises, the power she had almost tasted. The shadow had never left her. It had only been waiting, waiting for the moment she remembered, waiting to take her back. Olama's breath came in ragged gasp. Her body trembled violently. She looked at the spirit of the man she had betrayed, her vision swimming. Help me, she choked out, his expression hardened. You have to resist it. The old woman's voice was firm. Or it will consume you completely. But the shadow laughed, a chilly sound rising from within her. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was inside her bones, her blood. Resist? It whispered mockingly. A cold wind whipped through the hut. Even though the doors and windows were shut, the pendant she had dropped on the floor rose into the air, twisting unnaturally. The man's spirit took a step forward, his form flickering. Olama, listen to me. She belongs to me, the shadow hissed. Olama let out a strangled gasp as an invisible force wrapped around her throat. Her feet left the ground. She was being lifted. The hair crackled, the earth shook. The shadow was pulling her back. If she didn't fight now, she would never escape. Olama gasped as she was lifted higher, her body thrashing. The shadow's laughter called around her ears, sinking into her mind. You were always mine, it whispered. The air tightened around her throat, her vision blurred. The edges of the hut vanished, swallowed by darkness. The old woman shouted something, but her voice was distant. The man's spirit lunged forward, where the shadow flicked its invisible hand, and his form shattered into mist. Olama's body checked. She was sleeping, falling into the place the shadow had always planned for her. She was losing, and then, somewhere deep within her, something woke up. A sound, not a voice, not a whisper, but a pulse, a heartbeat that did not belong to her. The moment it stirred, the shadow stopped laughing. Olama felt it, the thing inside her, calling, twisting, stretching. The air shifted, the darkness around her shuddered. For the first time, the shadow spoke in fear. No! Olama's eyes snapped open, and they were not hers anymore. A deep, ancient force surged through her veins. Her body stopped struggling, her breath steadied, and with a single shattering pulse, the shadow screamed. A shock wave ripped through the hut. The old woman fell to the ground. The fire exploded in a rush of white-hot flames, and the shadow was forced back. It clawed at the walls, its form twisting unnaturally. It tried to hold on, but something stronger had woken up inside Olama, and it wasn't letting go. The man's spirit reformed, staggering. His face was ashen with shock. The old woman coughed, staring at Olama with new understanding. The hair was still thick, but different now, not just dark. Something else was present. The spirit of the man, her victim, looked at her, his hands shaking. You don't even know what you are, do you? Olama turned to him slowly. Her chest rose and fell. The ancient force inside her was settling, but it wasn't gone. It was watching, waiting. The spirit took a step forward. When I died, he said, I didn't move on. I was dragged somewhere else, somewhere wrong. His eyes darkened. That was where I saw it. Olama's fingers twitched. Saw what? His jaw tightened. The thing that holds the shadow. The room froze. The old woman muttered something under her breath. The spirit's gaze locked onto Olama. If you let it take you, he said, you won't just be lost. You will become something worse than the shadow itself. Olama's pulse pounded. You are its true vessel. That's why it never let go. Silence, and then Olama laughed. Low, quiet, but not her own. The old woman's eyes widened. The thing inside Olama smiled. Olama's laughter wasn't her own. The old woman whispered a prayer. The spirit of the man tensed. She is waking up. The shadow hissed. It no longer sounded powerful. It sounded desperate. The force inside Olama stretched like a beast just realizing its own strength. And in that moment, she understood. She wasn't just fighting a shadow. She was the key to something much worse. Her hands curled into fists. She had two choices: fight against it, try to push the force back, risking being overpowered by the shadow, embrace it, accept what she was becoming, but on her own terms. She turned to the spirit of the man she had killed. Tell me the truth, she said. Her voice was calm, steady. If I let this thing in, will I still be me? His jaw tightened. I don't know. The shadow lunged. Olama's eyes burned. As she made that choice, she embraced it. A shockwave burst from Olama's chest. The old woman fell back, shielding her face. The shadow shrieked, twisting violently, tried to hold on, but it was too late. Olama was no longer just herself. Her skin darkened, her eyes turning into pools of gold. Veins of fire ran through her arms. The pendant around her neck shattered. The force inside her roared to life. For the first time, the shadow was afraid. This isn't how it was supposed to go. It eased. Olama smiled. It is now. She lifted her eyes and crushed the shadow. The darkness exploded, scattering into a million screaming fragments. The spirit of the man stumbled back, eyes wide, and Olama, she stood in the center of it all, completely changed. The heart went silent. The fire flickered weakly. The old woman looked up cautiously. Olama took a slow breath. Her body felt different, lighter, stronger. The spirit of the man looked at her carefully. You controlled it, he said. She turned to him. I did. His gaze darkened. And now, Olama flexed her fingers. The power inside her wasn't leaving. It had settled, coiled deep within her. She wasn't just free from the shadow. She had become something new, something more. The spirit of the man gave a tired smile. Then, my work is done. Olama frowned. You never wanted revenge, he shook his head. I wanted to stop what I saw in that place. You were the only way. A heavy silence settled between them. Then, with a final nod, his form faded into light. Olama watched him go. For the first time in years, she was truly free. Or was she? As she stepped outside, the night wind cool against her face. A single question whispered in her mind. If I could control this, what else could I do? And the power inside her stirred, waiting, wanting, and hungry. Olama took a slow breath, staring at the space where the man's spirit had disappeared. She had won, she had survived, but the truth still weighed on her like iron. The memories came rushing back. It wasn't an accident. She had killed him. Years ago, in the very village she had fled from, Olama had been desperate, alone. She was an outcast, accused of things she didn't understand. Whispers followed her everywhere. A cursed child, a bad omen. She will bring ruin. The man, Ezulu, had been the only one who helped her. Or so she thought. He had taken her in, given her food, protected her from the village's wrath. But he wanted something in return. And when she refused, he turned on her. That night, she fought for her life. When she grabbed the dagger, she hadn't planned to use it, but Ezolu lunged at her. She acted on instinct. By the time she realized what she had done, his lifeless eyes stared up at her. She had expected to feel relief. Instead, all she felt was horror. She fled, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. She never stopped seeing his face in her nightmares, and now he had come back. Not to hunt her, but to save her. Olama fell to her knees, pressing her hands into the depths. I'm sorry. The words left her lips in a shaky whisper. The old woman watched in silence, her gaze unreadable. Olama closed her eyes, her chest aching. Ezulu, I did not mean to take your life. The wind stirred. A soft, gentle warmth surrounded her. She opened her eyes. For the first time, Ezulu's spirit did not look angry. His face was calm. Olama, he said softly, you were never meant to be a murderer. Tears burned in her eyes. I tried to forget, she whispered, but I never could. He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he gave a small, understanding nod. You were fighting for your life, he said, and now you must leave it. A heavy silence stretched between them. Olama hesitated, then placed her hand over her chest. I will not waste the life you helped me save, she vowed. The old woman exhaled deeply, as if she had been holding her breath. Ezulu's form glowed brighter. For the first time his spirit looked at peace, and then he was gone. But Olama knew he had truly forgiven her, and that was the one thing she had never been able to give herself. Olama wiped her tears and rose to her feet. The night air was cool, the village eerily silent. The old woman watched her carefully. You are different now. Olama looked down at her hands. The power inside her was still there, waiting, breathing, alive. But for the first time, it did not control her. She had made peace with her past. She had forgiven herself. And Ezulu, he was free. A soft wind swept through the trees, gentle, comforting. Olama lifted her chin. She had spent years running. Now, she was ready to face the world. She turned to the old woman. I need to leave. The woman nodded knowingly. Where will you go? Olama smiled, a small knowing smile. I don't know, she admitted, but for the first time, I'm not afraid. And with that, she stepped into the darkness, not as a girl running from her past, but as a woman stepping into her future.